Hello and welcome everyone to today's 30 minutes of growth webinar. So we are going to give some more folks a few minutes to join, but for those of you who are here now, I want to invite each of you to just close your eyes for a moment and picture this with me. So imagine walking into a workplace where every challenging conversation is met with openness and respect, where feedback is flowing freely back and forth through all levels of the organization. I want you to imagine a workplace where all conflicts are resolved constructively and with empathy. Now, as you envision this ideal scenario, I want you to think about your own organization. How closely does this vision align with your current reality? Okay, so I want you to tell me in the chat. I'm going to put the question in there. On a scale from 1 to 10, how closely does that vision of a healthy conflict culture, align with your organization's culture? Okay, so share your number with the group in the chat. How closely does your organization align with a healthy conflict culture on a scale from 1 to 10? We'll give everyone a minute and then we'll just get started. We got a 6 coming in there. Great. 7. Oh, getting closer to the top there. So for those of you who are just joining, I've asked for you to share in the chat, how closely does your organization align with a healthy conflict culture? Thank you, Karen, for getting that in. I don't know why my chat wasn't working there for a moment. All right, we got 7, 7, 5, 6, 5, 5, 6. All right, so we've got folks that are right in the middle there. Again, for anyone who's just joining, what I'm asking in the chat is, how closely does your organization align with a healthy conflict culture? Tell me on a scale from 1 to 10, 5, 6. All right. Perfect. Oh, 8. I think that's our highest so far. So Keri-Lynne and Ashley, are these numbers that you're seeing in line with what's typical, you think?
Absolutely. The 8 is a surprise. 7, 8,
Yeah.
They're higher
fantastic.
than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So today we're going to dive into it a little bit more detail. So for those that have some numbers on the lower scale, you're in the right place. We're going to dive into this. And for those that are on the higher end of the scale, I think you're going to hear a lot of the things that we're talking about today and see that in your organizations. All right, so we are a few minutes in, so let's officially kick this off. So hello, everyone. My name is Erin Biehl. I'm the Talent Development Evangelist here at Growth Space, and I am pleased to be your host for our 30 Minutes of Growth session today. So for those of you joining for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. And to all of our returning attendees, thank you so much for continuing to invest in your own professional development here with us at Growth Space. So these 30-minute sessions are designed to give HR and L&D professionals just like yourselves just quick, impactful insights that you can apply right away in your day-to-day work. So today we're going to be diving into a topic that is often sidestepped, but crucial for the health of any organization and frankly, for the health of any relationship, and that is conflict. So in previous sessions, we've discussed quite a bit about the neuroscience of behavior change and how our instinctual response as humans to change is what actually often leads us to avoid conflict altogether, right? And that conflict avoidance is often rooted in deep-seated fears and cultural norms within our organizations. But we all know that avoiding conflict comes with a cost, right? It can lead to resentment because issues go unaddressed. It can lead to decrease in productivity and lower engagement and morale and all of those things. So how do we think about shifting from a culture of avoidance to one that instead embraces healthy conflict and looks a lot closer to that ideal workplace that we were all imagining at the start of the session? So to help us explore this, I am excited to introduce our distinguished panelists, Keri-Lynne Shaw and Ashley Paré. So Keri-Lynne is a Chief People Officer and the CEO and founder of the Salary Bump. He is passionate about driving meaningful change and expertly guides CEOs and executive teams in aligning their strategies with business goals, creating cultures where success and growth go hand in hand. So, Keri-Lynne, thank you for joining us today. We are so thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And Ashley is a leadership and negotiation coach and CEO and founder of Own Your Worth. She helps clients gain recognition for their impact at work, articulate their value, and earn more money. She's been featured in the New York Times, CNN Money, and Good Morning America. She is a sought-after speaker, and you can check out her popular TEDx talk called Have Your Cake and Negotiate Too. So Ashley, so thankful to have you here today. Welcome. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Well, since we're only at 30 minutes of growth, we're going to jump right into our questions. So the first question I have for the panelists today is, why is it difficult for organizations to create a culture of feedback? Why do we see that variation in the numbers that came in at the start of today's session?
I'm going to start with one word, 4 letters. Fear. It's fear.
I didn't know if you were going to make us guess the word.
It started with an F, but it ended with an R instead of a K. It's just fear. People avoid having the conversation because they are afraid of the outcome. They are afraid of how the other person may react. They're not sure that they can. Like, let's use an employee boss situation. Am I allowed to give my boss feedback? What if he or she fires me? So there's so many fears around having real conversation, and fundamentally, that's what I believe is the real culprit.
Yeah, I second that. Fear is a big one, and also lack of skill. We don't typically grow up in our homes, in our households, even in our society, learning the language of feedback or conflict or negotiation or sharing our feelings or needs or boundaries respectfully. And so going into the workforce, sometimes we carry these fears, and then it prevents us from learning a skill to enter into these challenging but necessary conversations. And so it's fear mixed with lack of skill or confidence can really breed a difficult place to begin these important conversations.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we are avoiding these conversations, what is the cost of that? What is the cost of avoiding conflict? And what happens in a business when employees and leaders shy away from having these difficult conversations? What's the outcome? Mental health,
frustration, anger, avoidance, quietly quitting. It can seep into your home life. Like, there is so many things as a person that are at risk. As a business, when that happens and people then bow out, it impacts your business results. And I think one of the things a lot of CEOs or leaders in general just don't recognize how critical it is that we are creating these environments for us to drive the best business results and for us to help people bring their best selves to work. Their whole selves to work and help them unlock their potential. So the damage is significant.
I think there's also this, depending on where your current organization falls and where your own skill set lies, I think the cost to the business is, talent that is underdeveloped or underutilized, not fully reaching their potential. There's miscommunication or lack of communication, and silos are created, which prevents work from being completed or opportunities from being seized. And I think the avoidance shows up, of course, personally, and what we're willing or not willing to say or do. But it also, I think, then from a leadership, HR, and like maybe CEO perspective, there could be missing information. And when business decisions are being made, if the top executives don't have all the information about what's really happening underneath, sometimes that can impact business decisions. And that can be detrimental, of course, to the business, but also to its people.
Do either of you have any specific examples that you can share of where that's become a problem in an organization where you've worked?
Culturally, super damaging, and even to a point where I've left organizations because there was values conflicts, and part of those conflicts were just not honoring that, inviting people to the table, having real conversations, and putting things under the rug and not having trust and transparency. I've left 2 organizations in my career as a result of that. That was me being consequent, that these are the things that I am looking for. And both of those were in an HR function. So I believe one of the things that I struggled with the most in an HR function, and I'm not in corporate today, I do fractional work, is that I ended up being, at least from an expectation standpoint, leaders expect HR to carry this torch, that it's somehow our responsibility to make this happen. And I totally disagree with that. It's our responsibility to hold leaders accountable, and most certainly guide and teach and, practice these conversations, all of the above. But I don't believe it is our torch to carry. And it got very frustrating. A similar conversation around DEI, that it's HR's problem. No, none of this is. These are human behaviors, and we can help guide you, but you have to actually want to take that. So yes, I think I've also got positive examples of it really working and being able to create trust and transparency, and the beautiful environments that we were able to create.
Well, that's perfect, because that's my next question, right? We talked about what happens when we avoid conflict, but my next question is, then what does a culture of feedback or a culture of healthy conflict actually look like? So, Keri, I'd love to hear, some of your examples in that question.
So from that perspective, the one thing that we practice is how to communicate and how to share what's going on for you. We talked earlier in preparation for this meeting, and sometimes what coaches will teach you is, are you open to feedback? Or I'd like to share some feedback with you. And that's a panic situation for people. So teaching them how to create these environments, teaching them how to trust, how to have transparency, how to honor people's opinions and bringing them to the table. Instead of saying, are you open to feedback? Which then, oh gosh, something bad just happened. There's other ways that you can do that, and creating an environment, say, hey, listen, I'd love to talk about the meeting that we had earlier. Is now a good time? And however you want to share and show up for that, and honoring that space, and share how you feel versus an attack on the other person. So a lot of it is designing tools to be able to load people's toolkits and then help them practice. I think Ashley touched on that in the very beginning. This is a new muscle that you're building, and avoidance makes sense. I totally get it, because you're afraid. But once you start building that muscle and practicing, it does get bigger, I promise.
Yes. Yes. And I believe it starts individually, no matter what your title is or your level is, being able to enter into these conversations with some courage, with some curiosity, and practicing the language that Keri-Lynne just shared, of course. And I have some wins from my perspective, whether it was when I was a former people leader, or now doing consulting and workshops for organizations. It's really about getting, let's just say, one team into a room to create some safety, to create some trust, to create an environment where, I come in as that outside person and enable this conversation to happen. So you can hear what's going on from different perspectives. So you can see what's working, what's not working, what can we start, what do we need to stop. But creating this environment, and then, so like this session or multiple sessions to kind of get this information, but then how do you practice it every day? So a lot of times, right, talent, we're tasked with putting in performance management systems and using more tools. And how does that actually trickle down to how you're speaking with your employees, how often you're talking with your employees, what are leaders being held accountable for, in terms of, okay, if you know what's how everybody feels, then how do you put these practices or values into decision making? How do you use the systems that are available to you as tools to then be able to say, okay, we can have these conversations. We have a framework now of where everybody is coming into this conversation. So how do we work together to create a new solution? Or, I mean, it's like this is like the daily, everyone feels busy, 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 but these are the daily things that it's very easy to sweep under the rug, but again, cost us in the end if we don't tackle it every day.
Mhm. Yeah. And that you actually did a nice segue into my next question too, because we talked about, what does it look like? But what are the things that, we as people leaders, whether HR, L&D leaders, or other leaders within the organization, how do we actually go about building it? Like, what are the things you mentioned? It starts with the individual, but how do we actually go about doing that?
You want to go, Ashley?
Um, no, go ahead, Kyle.
So look, but Ashley and I are both professional coaches. And one of the things that I have found to be the most valuable tool that I have in my toolbox is a list of open-ended questions. Because you as HR leaders are every day facing as business partners, and the way for you to elevate as a true business partner is to not solve it for them. So yes, we can host workshops. Yes, we can come in and help build these muscles in a 1 or 2 day session. Absolutely. But it can be just as simple as an organic question. How did you feel that meeting went? How did you feel you showed up? Tell me more about how that felt. Tell me more about the situation, and creating an environment where people can share how they feel, and then teach them how to do it so that they can do it for their people. But I really believe it starts by being courageous and actually asking yourselves the question, right? How am I showing up as a leader? How do you want to show up as a leader? How do you want your people to feel? And give them a list of questions to put in their toolkit, just as you've now got open-ended questions in yours, and helping them figure out the environment that they want to create. And how do you co-create that with your people? Because no one likes to be told what to do. People want to be part of building that solution. It makes them feel empowered and supported. And those are the ways you build a trust-based environment. And if you don't have a trust-based environment with transparency, you will never have healthy conflict, period. It's the bottom rung. That's the most critical step in the ladder. And you do that by sharing your failures, sharing your wins, sharing what's keeping you up at night, helping your people to share and fostering these environments. It's the most important thing, in my opinion, that you can do.
Completely
You made me
agree.
think it's like, oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Ashley.
No, go ahead, Erin.
No,
No.
I was going to ask a follow-up question because you talked before about being really clear about it's not about attacking the person, it's about sharing the impact of whatever their behavior was, right? What was the result of it? And you talked about going into a coaching situation where you're asking, hey, how did you feel about that meeting? How do you transition when the person goes, oh, I thought the meeting went great?
Yeah.
How do you transition to sharing that impact when maybe they didn't see the impact that it was
Yeah.
had?
I'll tell you a story. How about that? I was
Love
thrown
it.
out of a boardroom 2 times in my career. One time I was thrown out. I was at like a mid-level stage in my career. I was working in HR. It was my first HR role. I was in charge of performance management. Didn't even know what that meant. Didn't even know how to spell HR. It was not in my trajectory when I came over. And there was a group, a university as part of BMW, and they had a desire to push internal training to HR. I'm like, well, that's a full-time job. I'm like, I really don't need that job, but all right, I'll take it. Like, I wasn't really that excited about it. It grew a bit of a fungus on the side of my desk until I finally had time to sit down and craft what this could mean for us as an organization, because they weren't doing anything with it. They were focused more on dealer trainings. So I went into the board with my presentation, which, like I understood was already approved. And I got my first slide up internal training, moving from university to HR. And the CEO was like, it's not moving. And I'm like, my boss told me I'm like taking this. Like, what do you mean it's not moving? My boss was not in the room. My CEO flailed. The head of training and after sales, they just sort of looked at each other, and I'm like, where are you guys? And helping me here. I then went to my second slide thinking like, I'll just keep talking and maybe he'll change his mind. No, he said, I just told you internal training is not moving to HR. And I was like, oh, okay. So, okay. Like I really was flailing. And he said, so get the F out. And I was mortified. So it was a Friday night, 7 p.m. I went back to my office. Thank God no one was there. Bawled my eyes out. Went home, ruined my weekend, tried to figure out why on earth that would have happened. Immediately called his assistant that Monday and said, I need to talk to him. And she got me on for Wednesday. So I strategized what I was going to say. And I walked in and I said, listen, I walked in with curiosity. So I did not share with him in this case how it made me feel, in part because at that stage in my career, I was for sure always the only woman in the room. And I didn't want him to see that he broke me, if that makes sense. Today, I might have handled this conversation a bit differently, but I went in and I led with curiosity and I said, listen, I'd really love to understand what is going on for you that you don't feel like training should be moved to HR. Could you help me understand? And he was like, yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. Just go and find out what the budget is. So it was actually, now fast forward, I felt like it was a test to see, I'm going to cut her off at the knees and see how she does. In a subsequent conversation earlier or the day before, the high potential list was given to the CEO and my name was on it, not by me, but by all the other leaders. And I truly felt like he was testing me. Today, I probably would have handled it a little bit different to say, listen, I'd like to share how Friday's meeting made me feel and would really love to understand it further. The kind of environment that I really appreciate is when I'm valued, when I'm spoken to directly, but not rudely, and where I can bring my whole self to work. That was a situation where I didn't feel so much that was happening. And so that would be the tweak that I would have made, but hopefully that gives you an idea on how you can approach that kind of a situation. It was mortifying.
Yeah, I love that.
Maybe I've been in similar situations, so I bet you a lot of people are feeling like, oh, so Keri-Lynne, thank you for sharing. I want to share from the onboarding perspective, because I feel like from a talent perspective, we spend so much time hiring, recruiting, talent acquiring, like what is our recruitment process? And I experienced this too personally, where once I joined an organization in my first meeting with my new boss, my manager, she asked me the question, how do you think that went? And I thought it went well. And then she gave me some feedback that I spoke up too soon. And I said, oh, I don't know, never had that feedback before. And so I was taken aback and immediately felt defensive and wasn't ready to have that conversation. And I think from being new to an organization, I was bringing what I knew from other organizations and what worked well into this new company. And so from a talent and learning and development and people perspective, how are we setting up the new hires that we're bringing in around feedback? If you're a manager and you're bringing somebody new into the culture, ask them how they like to receive feedback. How do they like to give feedback? When do they like to hear it? When don't they like to hear it? What's the best way that you can communicate with them? And also, as the manager, share your expectations and the way that you like to receive feedback, and that, hey, I'm open to giving and receiving feedback. I want to hear from you. So setting that stage very early on from a leadership perspective is so crucial to being able to sustain and retain talent, because that initial conversation like really just ruined the experience I had as a new employee within that culture, and felt like I was walking on eggshells after, because I had to figure out how to fit in versus be myself. And so as leaders, people leaders, I think it's really important that we encourage and coach and teach everybody, right? That we all have a relationship with conflict. And I don't care if you say, I love being direct. I love to get feedback. It doesn't bother me. Like we all have a relationship with it. And if we're not able to adapt our style, our leadership style to the people on our team, to the people who are in that particular meeting, it can end up costing us our role, our future with the company, or just the way that we're able to connect with our employees. And I think HR has a really unique perspective to bring to an organization on how folks can create that safety from the beginning, especially because we put so much effort into hiring people. And then what happens when they're on board is so, so crucial as well.
I love that. I think you made a really good point about setting an expectation between an employee and a leader, right when they come on board with an organization so that they understand each other's communication style. And I'll share, one thing that I learned as a leader. So you want to model the behavior, right? You want to be constantly asking for feedback and show that you are open to feedback as well. But so often the folks that report to you, if you say, oh, I love getting feedback, give me feedback, they go, yep, okay, yep. So a way as a leader that you can ensure that you get the feedback is to be more specific, is come out of that meeting and say, hey, I know we just worked together with that client. What do you have feedback for me on the way that we did XYZ? And making it more specific is a way that invites the employee to feel that psychological safety that you're talking about, saying, oh, they do value my feedback. And so that I thought I'd share that because that was something that I think about often. And it's more than just saying, hey, I'm open to feedback, but really, really actually asking for it in the moments that matter. So we have just about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to tap into your coaching hats here. So you just said you're both coaches. And if I was about to walk into a difficult situation with a peer, a team member, maybe my boss, what coaching would you give me? What skills would I need to have in order to be successful in that position?
Oh, I don't know who should go first, but I take the emotion out of it first and foremost and reflect and really think about how you want to respond versus react and map out in your head, whether that's 24 hours, 48 hours, I need time to reflect, or I'm going to go ballistic, or I'm going to lose my, what on this person. So trying to take the emotion out of it would be first and foremost. Then I'll tag Ashley in and see how she would follow up on that.
Yeah, I've created an acronym for fear. So again, you might be having some emotion, but how do you actually take that emotion out of this to prepare? And so preparation is key. You got to prepare. And what do you want to get out of that meeting? What do you want to share? But my acronym for fear is feel. So feel whatever you're feeling, make space to feel it, and kind of leave it outside that meeting. E is evaluate. Gather information, prepare, evaluate what you want to share or ask for in that meeting. A is accept. So accept what's within your control, what's not within your control. Accept that you can ask some questions and may not get a solution, but you can ask. And then R is respond. So how do you actually show up and respond, repair, go into that meeting and make the conversation actually happen? So you're showing up. So that's how I would prepare you to move through the fear and have that conflict conversation.
I love that.
Moving back full circle back to the first answer there, right? What's stopping us in the first place?
Yes.
Well, Keri-Lynne and Ashley, thank you so much for joining today. Are there any last thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience in our final minute here?
I would only say that I so commend this group. You have, I think, the best job in the company. One of the hardest jobs in the company. You are one of the few people besides the CEO that has the breadth. And I think you have more depth than even the CEO on every single aspect of the business that you are in. And you should know that because it's important. And I think we're often the last to eat. We're the last to perhaps get any kind of validation, and you deserve all of the above. So kudos to all of you. It was for sure one of my favorite jobs, other than now owning my own company, but well done. I really salute you and commend you.
Yes. Cheers to that, Keri-Lynne. I will just say, keep going and remember to fill your own cup. It can be a thankless, draining position, but it's amazing that you're here today. So do yourself a favor and write down what you've learned. What are you going to take away? What will you put into practice? And own your worth. I work with so many clients who are doing amazing, amazing work, and we don't give ourselves credit. We're not talking about it. So you're putting your time and energy into growing yourself. So make sure you share, make sure you articulate the value that you're delivering and own it. All of this expertise that you have going into a hard conversation is worth it in the end. So that way you can stay in this field and do the good work you're doing.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining. This was a very enlightening conversation, and we hope to see all of our listeners back for the next one. Thank you, everyone.